A lot of you probably have seen my next guest on TV, and he's run for Congress, and he is now in charge of a fantastic group for veterans called Veterans on Duty. Please welcome to the stage Jeremy Hunt. Oh. Hey, man. How are you? Thank you for doing this. You too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
So let's talk about Veterans on Duty and exactly what you guys do, because I love your mission and the focus of the organization.
Yeah, well, we are a group of veterans who care deeply about our national security policy, and we want to advocate for policies that keep America safe, strong, and free. Those are the three things that were really important for us. We're a policy advocacy organization, a 501c4, and it really started about 3 years ago in response to what we saw as a lot of the Biden-Harris administration's really just misguided priorities. I mean, it began from day one in the Biden-Harris administration. I don't know if you all recall, Secretary Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense, the first thing he does is do this military-wide stand down. And he says that the number one threat against the United States is not China, not Iran, not Russia. Oh, no. The number one threat against our military right now is white supremacy in the military. And he literally wasted just so many millions of man hours, paid over $114 million on these DEI policies, trying to root out white supremacy. And by the way, a report came out later that showed that exactly 0.005% of the military is somehow connected to any case of white supremacy. So it's a huge waste of time. But we came up out of that, and also just the military recruitment crisis, which I'm happy to talk about in a little bit. And those really kind of misguided priorities have translated into a lot of failed policies. I mean, we saw the really disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan and the fall of Kabul. A lot of veterans who are part of Vets on Duty are Afghanistan veterans and fought there, and it was extremely painful to see, and of course that resulted in 13 service members being killed in action. It did not have to be that way, and it's only gotten worse. And so we sprung into action. We started writing op-eds, engaging in news media, and really just advocating for policies that we think will make a significant difference, so we don't see just this domino effect that's been happening over the last several years, from the invasion of Ukraine to the banning our ally Israel. I mean, it's been a mess, and so that's what we're all about. And so I'm just proud to be a part of such an organization that cares about those things.
So you mentioned recruitment, but I got to imagine that morale between people who are active duty is suffering under what they're seeing with the policies of the administration, and not just morale, but you also see an administration that doesn't seem to want to invest in the military, even keeping up with the rate of inflation.
That's exactly right. And if you talk to anybody in the Biden-Harris administration, and I'm sure that in the Harris-Walz administration this will continue, they'll say, oh no, we've increased our defense spending. But if you look at it and you adjust for inflation, it's actually a cut, and we are not keeping up with China, which is the number one threat against the United States. They are investing. China has invested more in their conventional forces than any country since the end of World War II. That is more than Russia and the United States coming out of during the Cold War. I mean, they are investing at a clip that we are not keeping up. And so morale is low. And so we've talked to several folks who are still on active duty. Obviously, they can't speak up. And so we have to be their voice, those of us who have served and are now veterans. And, we always say that we took off our uniform, but that didn't end our service to our country. And so we continue to advocate for those things.
Now, you've mentioned white supremacy. I was led to believe that one of the great national security threats actually is climate change, which is why we need battery-powered tanks.
Oh, that was included as well, yes. So by the end of 2027, the Department of Defense is trying to get to a zero-emission fleet, and which is a disaster. I mean, they came out with a 50-page climate change report, all about how we need to address this problem. But there was no such report about the military recruitment crisis and the readiness challenges that we're having right now. The military right now, or even just look at the Army. Right now, 10,000 soldiers short of where we're supposed to be. And just 2 years ago, in fiscal year 22, we were 15,000 soldiers short of our goal. And by the way, that is the amount of like an entire division. I mean, that's as if you go down to Fort Stewart, that 3rd Infantry Division, where I proudly had the honor of serving, that's like we're missing all of 3rd Infantry Division. I mean, it is a serious issue. And no such report on that, all right? And so this year they're saying that we're on pace to meet our goal. goal, our recruitment goal. But if you pull back the onion a little bit, you'll notice that the only reason we're on pace to meet our goal is because they reduced the goal, the number for the goal, by 10,000. And so, I mean, they think we're not paying attention, but so those are the things that we're saying. Look, we got to pay attention to these issues because we are not prepared for the next big fight, and those are the things that we care about.
On recruitment, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding as well is one of the ways, in addition to lowering the number, is they've also lowered the standards for people to get into the military.
Yeah.
And that causes has aspects and fallout as well from maybe people who shouldn't necessarily go, but perhaps they've gone there to get out of going to jail or other issues, and that can also impact our readiness.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at they've tried to get creative now and are very reactive to the problem. They're trying now to get creative and finding ways to get more people in the military. Some people who might not be the best fit. To be fair, we are in a place where a lot of young people just don't see the interest in serving. The military is increasingly becoming an institution filled with people who are coming from families who have served, and so most people who are serving in the military today, it's a small circle, which is not good. Just the military civilian divide, so we're seeing all sorts of instances where they are now reacting to the problem, whereas they could have been forward-leaning and realizing that, hey, we need to come up with a better pipeline to make sure that we aren't going to be in the once-in-a-generation recruitment crisis. And there are things you can do. I mean, I was in JROTC. I actually don't come from a family that served in the military. My grandfather did for a few years, but he passed away before I was even after I was born, but when I was very young. And so I didn't really have that necessarily military influence. It came from programs like JROTC, the Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps in high school. There's lots of programs out there that can encourage service. But when you're in a position now where we're already 10,000 soldiers short, well, now it's too late to try to come up with something that's forward-leaning. And so those are the types of problems that we are continuing to see from an administration that clearly has been totally distracted. And then they're also shooting themselves in the foot because, it's interesting. The Army had a survey recently that said, we're trying to discover the main reason people don't join the military. The number 2 highest mentioned reason why people aren't joining the military is because of the perceived racism in the military. Well, why are they perceiving racism in the military? Maybe it's because the Secretary of Defense had this nationwide stand down of our military because of so-called white supremacy. I mean, so you just see this vicious cycle repeating itself, and it's been a disaster.
So I'm guessing what you're saying is doing recruiting ads with The Rock isn't maybe necessarily the strategy to actually get people to come into the military with this ad campaign that I've been reading about that did nothing. I mean, what are the policies that you think might actually work to not just boost recruitment, but actually refocus us on the military? And I realize in saying this, a lot of it depends on who wins the election.
Absolutely. I mean, I think first and foremost is that, young high schoolers, this might sound a little crass, but I mean, young high schoolers who are thinking about joining the military or even in the college age, they are inspired. They want to go and kill bad guys. I mean, they want to feel they are serving their country, making a difference. Not sitting in hours long of mandated transgender training, which is what they're doing to them now. I mean,
They don't want to go to war with pronouns, is what you're saying.
Exactly. I mean, the mission of the military is to deter, fight, and win our nation's wars. And so if we can get the military recentered on that, then I think that a lot of other things will kind of fall into place. But we haven't been centered on that. And we can kind of talk about just the cascade effect of all the really kind of global embarrassments that the Biden-Harris administration has been just kind of showing off to the world all over just since they've been in office.
Yeah, let's talk about that because it starts, I think Mitch McConnell was raised that it's probably not a coincidence that Putin did what he did in Ukraine after seeing how Biden handled Afghanistan.
Yeah.
We have the spillover effect around the world. The Wall Street Journal does a story about how Venezuela wants to invade Guyana, and the Iranians, the Chinese, and the Russians are all there like, I didn't even realize Iran had a navy capable of getting around the world, and yet here they are south of us in Venezuela. There does seem to be not just cascading effects, but also cascading crises that come from those effects.
That's exactly right. When you project weakness, it invites chaos. And so we projected an amazing amount of weakness at that botched withdrawal of Afghanistan, as I mentioned before. And then you saw Putin was already kind of looking and trying to see when he could, make a move. And then we have our President Biden gets up and says, "Oh, a minor incursion is no big deal." I mean, so you're inviting these type of activities. And then if you look at just the emboldening of Iran, the Biden-Harris administration has been so obsessed with trying to stop escalation. We don't want the forces things to get escalated in the Middle East. So they're doing everything they can. They are not enforcing sanctions against Iran, even though Iran has been, of course, supporting Hamas and Hezbollah and all these other kind of terrorist proxy organizations, and still, by the way, have 5 Americans held captive right now in Gaza. So they're still releasing. They have not enforced sanctions. They've released over $80 billion to Iran since Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been in office. And so when you do that, it shows that we are more afraid of our enemies than our enemies should be afraid of us. We should not be more afraid of escalating with Iran. If we are the greatest nation on earth, Iran needs to be afraid of escalating with the United States. And so they've totally gotten it backwards. And I think that's why you've seen this continued attacks, even on our soldiers. We've lost, sadly, some soldiers even from here in the state of Georgia were killed in these attacks, and just all over. And so it didn't have to be this way. When you project strength, our enemies are held at bay. And that's what we need to return to the White House. Otherwise, it's only going to get worse. And thank you.
I want to say it was 6 years, maybe longer than that, within the last decade, though, Democrats made a concerted effort to go out and find veterans to run as Democrats because Republicans had seemingly cornered the markets on running. And so there are a number of people who have served in uniform, who have gone to Congress as Democrats, but it doesn't seem like their positions necessarily are supportive of fixing the problems that they themselves have encountered. Then they just are towing the Biden-Harris line.
That's exactly right. I mean, we don't need, look, I think veterans are in a unique position to speak to their service. They serve their country. I think they have a serious voice, and I think that's very important. But when you have the Democrat Party going around just trying to find veterans to just parrot what they already want to hear, and just kind of towing the party line, it's not going to make things better in Washington. And so, we, as I said, we're C4, and so we run issue ads dealing with specific issues, but we have talked about certain incumbents in office who have not been doing their part to represent policies that best promote a safe, strong, and free America.
So, I'm glad you raised that because it is a great distinction between a C3, which can educate but not actually advocate specifically on these policy issues, and a C4, which can and actually be engaged more aggressively. So how are you guys engaging on the ground those issues?
Yeah, well, we can't officially endorse candidates or anything like that, but we do talk about, we've run ads in different states. We ran ads in Montana, we ran ads in Texas, we ran ads in D.C. We're actually going to have some coming out soon dealing with some of these issues. And what we talk about is we're highlighting the policy failures because there are so many of them, you can kind of get lost in them. But we highlight the policy failures. We talk about the border. One thing that we don't talk a lot about when we talk about the border is that these illegal Chinese nationals have been just flooding the border. In 2021, there were about maybe 340 illegal Chinese nationals that we apprehended crossing the border. Just a few years later, we were on track to have 25,000 Chinese illegal nationals just this year alone crossing our border. And that, of course, doesn't include the gotaways. So stuff like that we're highlighting because there is just the mainstream media is not going to report it. I'm thankful for you and for the stand you make and finally telling the truth. It's huge. And so we try to amplify issues that Americans need to hear about, especially during an election year.
Okay, and you'll have to forgive me, but I want to go off on a tangent with you because you just mentioned that. A month and a half ago, former deputy director of the CIA and the former head of Central Command write an op-ed in Foreign Affairs saying, we probably have bad people here. When you have 25 to 30,000 young Chinese military-age males who have come into this country across the Mexico border, last I checked, there's a big ocean between us and China, and they're going to Mexico and walking up. You have people from Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Mauritania. It seems like there is a crisis unfolding here that local law enforcement and the military will ultimately have to deal with, that people, and when you have he's not a partisan guy, the former deputy director of the CIA and the former head of the Central Command. It seems like this is an obvious issue that needs to be dealt with, that no one in Washington on the Democratic side really cares to deal with.
That's exactly right. I mean, they have been just trying to raise awareness and sound the alarm, saying we have a serious issue here in the United States. They believe that a threat is imminent. It was funny. I was an intel officer in the Army, and so many times people will kind of say, "Oh, so do you know some secrets? You know, what do you know? And you can't tell me anything. You'll probably have to kill me." I'm like, there are really no secrets that are interesting. That could be more interesting than what's open source information right now. The fact that there is an imminent threat against the United States from within, and not to mention the fact all the threats from abroad. I mean, you don't even need to get into the secrets to see just how dangerous of a time we're living in right now. And again, it did not have to be this way. This was a policy decision from the Biden-Harris administration. And if you look at just some of the policy standpoints, I do believe that Kamala Harris wants to take an even worse turn. She's even worse on Israel than Biden is. And so I think that we're going to see things get even worse if we see Harris Walz in the White House.
Yeah, I just got to say, and I made this point on radio, I don't think it's a coincidence that Netanyahu meets with Kamala Harris 3 weeks ago in private and goes back to Israel and begins like killing every bad guy as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
That probably whatever she said to him is like, I better deal with this problem as quickly as possible in case she gets elected.
Yeah, and thank God he did.
Yes.
I think it shows that you know, even here in the United States, I mean, we could have done that too. The difference is will. The Israelis have a will to fight and to defeat this. They are not backing down. We have the capability, we have the intel, we have all the ability to do the same thing, to keep our enemies at bay, but we choose not to. And that is really just the danger of the time that we're living in, because I do think there is just kind of a spirit of complacency that's just kind of started to arise. A lot of people just think that we're fine. You know, I think 9/11 was just so long ago to a lot of people that, you know, that certainly nothing that serious could happen again. But we live in times right now where there truly is chaos all around the globe, and we have a president who has emboldened our enemies and has made it clear that if you want to attack American troops, there will not be hell to pay. There'll just be, you know, some very we'll kind of just slap your wrist a little bit. We'll send you a strongly worded letter. I mean, even the Houthis who've been attacking.
I was literally just about to ask you about this.
Reading your mind.
Don't, and yet, I mean, they're firing on like aircraft carriers, and Biden's like, don't do that again.
Yes, I mean, one of the first things he did in office was take the Houthis, delist the Houthis out of the terrorist or designation list. I mean, that's crazy. And then all of a sudden they start attacking us, and you wonder why this is happening. I mean, it's wild. And even if you look at the Biden-Harris administration, their ties to Iran, it is very frightening. I mean, you talked about this. I mean, you have Rob Malley, who was the architect of the Iran nuclear deal, the failed Iran nuclear deal. All of a sudden, without explanation, gets suspended, gets a security clearance suspended, and then this report comes out that Iran has had this kind of influence campaign that's infiltrated the top levels of the Biden-Harris administration, and people sending emails back to Iran saying, "Oh, our supreme leader, you know, we love." I mean, it's crazy. And so after that, and then we have on 9/11, on the anniversary, the 22nd anniversary of 9/11, you have Joe Biden announced that he's releasing $6 billion in these unfrozen assets to Iran. And then, of course, a few weeks after that, what happens? We had October 7th, funded by Iran, in Hamas, where they killed 1,200 innocents killed and over 100 innocent people taken hostage, including several Americans. And so it is not hard to see the lines and how all this connects. I have some friends that, you know, I grew up with that are into conspiracy theories and stuff. And I was just, you know, and I'm like, you don't need a conspiracy theory. Just like read the news. Look at what's going on right now in our country.
Yes. You say that, and it is the least reported story. Semaphore broke the news, and no one wanted to cover that. You have people who are sympathizers of Iran, to the chief of staff, to what the secretary of the Navy or assistant secretary of defense, one of them, that's still on the job, that is tied through leaks to Iran. It's insane to me that we've got this level of infiltration.
Yeah, and it's amazing just when you have the media in your pocket, and the mainstream media is just not going to tell Americans what's really going on. You see this kind of stuff happen, and it seems like the Biden-Harris administration just kind of gets away with it. But that's why the onus is on us to call it out. And so that's why we do a lot of advocacy. We're constantly writing about it, talking about it. I'm not afraid to go into media that is not sympathetic to what I believe, and I'm willing to advocate and to present our view because I stand on truth, right? It's really easy to speak truth, to speak what you believe when you know you're standing on truth. And I think now more than ever is a time for Americans who care about these issues, who want a safer America and want their kids to grow up in a safer America. Now is the time to speak up.
So I got to ask you a question, but before we wind this up, just you and your passion for this. I mean, I know you mentioned your service, but you've had this ride through politics and being on TV, and now you're here with an advocacy group advocating for veterans. Why spend your time on this as opposed to anything else?
Yeah, well, I mean, it started when just growing up, my dad's a pastor, my parents have been involved in ministry all my life, and they told me that the number one thing, you serve God and you serve your country. And that was just embedded in me. And as I mentioned, I joined JROTC and decided I wanted to serve my country and had the honor of going to West Point and graduated from there and served as an officer, an intel officer in the Army. And even after I decided to transition out of the Army and head to law school, I knew that I wanted to continue making impact because I cared. And I'm still in touch with a lot of folks who are still in the military. I'm probably on the younger end than some folks who are even in our organization. And so I have a lot of friends who are still in. I graduated from West Point in 2015, and then I finished my service in 2020. So it's not that long ago for me, and I'm hearing these reports of some of the things that they're being mandated to these training sessions they're having to do, all the kind of misguided priorities. So I can't afford to sit back. I care about my country. I have my wife and I, who's here with me, my wife Kai, and we have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I want them to grow up in an America that is free. I want them to grow up in America where they don't have to be worried about the next attack or what's going to happen to them. And so that's what inspires me to speak up, and I'm not stopping anytime soon. So thank you.
On a practical aspect, I mean, obviously, the ideal situation is for Republicans to win the House, the Senate, and take back the White House. If that doesn't transpire, maybe we hold Congress, maybe we hold the Senate. I mean, what policy position should Americans be thinking about that they can just push Congress to pursue, even if we don't control the White House?
Yeah, I think it's one, invest in our military, and two, one thing I've noticed is this kind of rise of this belief that we can just retreat from the world, push our head in the sand here in the United States and just kind of pretend that everything will be okay. That Russia, Iran, North Korea, this kind of new axis of evil that's been forming, really forming in opposition to us in our interests, that somehow they are not going to continue advancing and trying to attack us. That is silly. I really do believe that these people, the axis of evil, they want to defeat the United States and defeat the American way of life. I happen to believe that in American exceptionalism, I believe that we live in the greatest country on earth. There's no way that they will succeed if we have the will to fight and to do what it takes. But we can surrender our leadership on the global stage and surrender to China and have them write the rules on the future and have them write the rules on AI and all these kind of new technologies that are coming out. And we could allow China and Russia to do that, or we could step up. And I think that there's a lot of this kind of attitude of surrender. I would even put this whole isolationist attitude, I think, is a form of surrender. And I believe that we have to be able to understand that a strong America is the only way that we have a safe America, and a strong military is the way to do that. And so, in 2 years' time, in 2026, our nation will celebrate our 250th birthday. And I think there's going to be a lot of kind of a big battle over what story do we tell about America. And I happen to believe in the story that we live in the greatest country on earth and in the greatest civilization that the world has known. But there's another story that is that America has been a force for evil around the globe, and that our so-called meddling around the globe has led to all this chaos, and that we are the problem. And that's the story that our enemies tell. That's the story that you can hear if you go to Iran, North Korea, Russia, China. That's the story that many people on the left are telling. That's the story that even Iran funding protests on American universities. That's the story they want promoted on the left. And sadly, we're starting to hear some of that on the right. some commentator, some folks, I don't know if it's just want to get clicks or what, are saying this absolutely, really making absurd statements about our country. And if that's the story we're going to tell, the future will not be very bright. And so we need to make sure that we have folks who are willing to tell the truth, people like you who are really telling the truth, standing on principle that you believe. And I think I speak for a lot of listeners here who would just thank you for standing on principle. You've weathered the storm through the years, ironclad, and I appreciate that because it's inspiring for the next generation.
Thank you. When I hear you talk, I'm hearing Senator McConnell's conversation echo in my ear that we spent 36% of GDP in World War II and had a lot of people die. We spend 2 or 3% now, and we think that's too much, that it's actually will cost us a whole lot less to avoid war by being strong. Yeah. And it just I guess that's a message that we need to keep pointing out.
That's exactly right. I mean, right now is the time to make those decisions, to really focus on what we need to do to make sure we got to improve our acquisitions process. I mean, there's so many things we need to do to make sure we're in a better place. But investing in our military, making sure that our soldiers are protected and that they are safe. I mean, look at even just the disaster, the Biden Pier project. It literally was breaking apart in the ocean. He was like, "Oh, we're going to deliver all this aid," and it was a total failure. Wasted $200 million. I mean, stuff like that, putting American soldiers in harm's way. We can't have more of that. We've got to make sure we have a defense policy that makes sense, that works, and it tells the story of America. And so we are around the country asking veterans, and even people who, even if you're not a veteran, but you know other veterans and people who care about these issues, join us. You can go to vetsonduty.org and sign up with us. We'd love to hear your story. And again, even if you're not a veteran, but you care about these issues, join us too. Because we want to, now is the time to speak up. We can't wait until it's too late. We have to speak up right now. And that's something that's near and dear to our hearts. And so we're just getting started.
So before I round up, those of you can't see it, but I've got this Cue the Veterans on Duty video. And I know I do want to introduce this video. Jeremy, again, thank you very much for coming, and let's roll the tape. Uh-oh. And of course, we would have technical difficulty here. We're going to reboot this. We got Jeremy and we've got Ronald Reagan speaking. We gotta get the audio here. Sorry about that.
No worries. You can check it out.
Well, let's see. Dan. 30 seconds. All right, good. Because we still got time on the clock here. So. Okay, we got the Ronald Reagan clip in the video here, which we'll get to. So Reagan was peace through strength.
That's right.
We have had historically this isolationist tendency that crops up in the country, and it oftentimes does come from the right. And so we've kind of talked about that, and I know I've seen some of the submitted questions here, even for some of the people tomorrow, and some questions I couldn't get to with Mitch McConnell on this, that I do have this concern about people on the right talking ourselves out of winning.
That's exactly right. I mean, I think that a lot of it is just a failure to really pay attention to what's going on and saying that, like, well, actually, we've tried isolationism before World War II. It did not work. We tried it before World War I. Did not work. I mean, it has failed at every turn. And you talked about this a lot. I mean, when we look at history and we've tried things and it continues to fail, well, that's why we're conservative. We look to what works. And so, I hope that people will kind of wake up to that issue and start to see it. But even more than that, one concern that I have is that even on the right, a lot of people can't have an actual conversation and discussion about it. Let's actually go through the policy. Let's talk about the kind of pros and cons to talk about it. But instead, people are just so quick to just, rhino, neocon, or whatever, just all these ridiculous labels. It's unhelpful. We have to figure out how to disagree better in this country. And we don't do that well. But things are not going to get better until we figure that out.
Now, I'll say, roll the tape.
America's story is one forged through service and sacrifice. The courage to serve and the strength to fight. And the willingness to stand against those who threaten us around the world. At Veterans on Duty, that's what we believe. And that's what we've come together to defend. This devotion to duty, to America, is embedded in our ethos. It stays with us as we leave the military and transition to civilian life, and so it remains our mission to protect and fight for our freedoms wherever they are threatened. But not everyone sees it this way. Recently, America's credibility has been undermined and outright questioned. We have been reduced to a mere shadow of our former self. We are weaker and less respected. And our adversaries are more emboldened today than ever before. At home, our fellow citizens feel more shame than pride in their country. Veterans who wore the flag on their shoulders are watching in disbelief, because we know that peace and stability in the world requires a strong America, an engaged America, an America whose military is prepared, equipped, focused, and lethal. Only then will America remain safe, strong, and free. The voice of veterans on issues of national security and defense are needed now more than ever. And it's the mission of Veterans on Duty to make sure that those voices are heard. Because we know the stakes. And our service didn't end when we took off our uniform. The fight continues and is too important to ignore. We must stand up to all those who seek to undermine American strength at home and abroad. We are Veterans on Duty. Join us.
Jeremy, thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.